Daniel, let me bring you in. Let's talk about what's happening now and then what happens next. Benjamin Netanyahu has never publicly addressed these accusations that a policy of containment, of keeping Gaza quiet, suited his aims. What is his calculus at present? We know absolutely categorically rejects a ceasefire until he says Hamas is destroyed and all the hostages are freed. So that's in the first instance. What's the calculus at this point? And then what happens next?
Well, thankfully, Becky, that's a headspace I don't occupy. But let me start by thanking the organizers, Qatar and the Doha Forum, and, of course, the Qatari mediation efforts. I think something is clear, which is that Netanyahu is not looking forward to the morning after, because that's when one will face the music for what happened. I also think that we've not been paying attention to what he and his coalition have been saying. So first of all, yes, we can speak about the morning after, but as Hussam said, this can still get worse. It's getting worse every day. Every day that this doesn't end, not only the proximate causes of death from the Israeli military operation, but also the gathering an already devastating humanitarian catastrophe. So this can get worse in Gaza, and when you look at Netanyahu's policy and his government, mass displacement is still on the agenda today, and that doesn't just apply to Gaza. The provocations in the West Bank and East Jerusalem will continue, and the structural discrimination, and it's getting worse, against the Palestinian citizens of Israel is still there. To me, that suggests there are three lessons for the now and for the morning after. The first lesson is, when you have a government which says there's only rights for one people in this land, where there are senior ministers who say, we're for ethnic cleansing, we're eradicationists, when you have a designation made, not just by Palestinians, but by Israeli human rights defenders and the blue chip international organizations, that this meets the legal definition of apartheid, you take that seriously, and this is a time to mobilize, not normalize. Now, the second thing I would say is, and this is crucial for Netanyahu's calculation, this gets worse the more it is indulged. So if you treat what Israel is doing with impunity, if, for instance, you provide more weapons, more vetoes at the UN Security Council, then Israel will do its worst. And in this respect, Israel's not some kind of aberrant actor. That's what happens in circumstances like this. So you have to introduce accountability. There has to be, if you want the Israeli direction of travel, because yes, this government is an extreme iteration, but the trajectory that we have been on has been quite constant. If you want to change that trajectory, then you have to introduce costs and consequences, a different cost-benefit calculation. And that takes you to the third thing, which is the US is clearly woefully inadequate at that task, right? But there's another thing, and we just heard our Chinese friend. The idea that this should be a US monopolistic exercise is out of sync with the world we live in today, with contemporary geopolitics. So, Becky, it's interesting, for someone who works on this issue, it's often, oh wow, you do Israel-Palestine, that's interesting, as if it exists on a different planet. But now it's at the heart of what some people have called the polycrisis. And you see that those who have been lecturing everyone about international law and international humanitarian law are at the forefront today of undermining those things. For those who stuck around yesterday evening, we had an interesting example of it, let's say, from the podium late in the day. We see that this can also metastasize into a crisis of global shipping lanes, of the global economy, the global architecture of the UN. So we have to apply this shifting geopolitics also to the question of Palestine, Israel. And in that respect, something important and interesting has happened, and perhaps even a source of some hope, which is we've seen that for so much of the so-called global south and in many cities in the West, Palestine now occupies this kind of symbolic space of and it's a kind of avatar of a rebellion against Western hypocrisy, against this unacceptable global order, and against the post-colonial order. And let me say this, because in many societies we are seeing at one and the same time a rise in both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. By that I mean actual anti-Semitism, not when people are stigmatized and unjustly accused of anti-Semitism for criticizing Israel. And I think it's crucial that we don't go there, that we find the common humanity. And if I may, it is so important to me that there are Jewish voices who are saying not in my name, who are saying the Jewish tradition is also a universal tradition. Because this can't be zero-sum. This can't be a religious war. And it's not in my name.
Thank you, Daniel.
Just to say, Hussam, I agree. If there's seriousness about two states, then there should be recognition. There should be an imposition of that reality. But two cautionary tales. One, be careful what you wish for in terms of what may be considered as constituting two states. I think there has been drift in that and it needs to be pulled back. But another cautionary tale is the thing that is most egregious. We have to question, is it the absence of a state or is it the existence of a reality in which people are treated with a system of structural violence and inequality? And I think the message from the world should be, we have supported two states, but the one thing we cannot accept is this ongoing denial of rights. And if Palestinians eventually choose, and others choose, that partition is not going to be the way forward and equality is the way forward, then we should have an open mind to this outcome as well.